Hi, I'm Linda Keane. I'm an architect and environmental designer, and I am a professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I also am director of an educational nonprofit called Next.cc. I do most of my work with students and also with my partner, who's also my husband, Mark Keane. And we have a very broad practice. We started out as filmmakers doing Walt Disney hand-drawn like films that were shown on PBS and won a PBS Emmy for a retrospective. And about that time, the computer came, and even though we love freehand drawing, we were also fascinated by the possibilities of the computer. And we started a practice in green architecture and have really pursued that since. It was in high school, and I began to spend almost half of the day in the art room, and I read all the books there, and there was just one book on architecture, and it was on the modern masters. It was about Le Corbusier, Frank Lloyd Wright, and Mies van der Rohe. And I started designing houses in high school, and I knew I liked art and math, so it seemed that architecture and people and travel, so architecture seemed a great fit. Actually, the school I attended is in Indiana, and it built one of the first passive solar architecture buildings. And it also, because it was in the middle of Indiana, which is in the middle of the countryside, and there isn't a lot of architecture there, it had a point of having all the students travel constantly. We would take a field trip every semester. We did study abroads. They started the first around the world study trip for architects, for students. Anyway, it was that work in the passive solar building as a student that really changed me. And I started practicing on an invitation of an architect before I graduated. And one of the first buildings I worked on was a solar energy building. It was never built. It was probably great that it was never built. But ever since then, the idea of passive and active forces acting on architecture were really crucial to me. It is not just a noun. It is not just a building or a city or a plan or a strategy. It's actually very much a verb, and it is really an active force of change. I think architecture is design of the built environment connected to natural systems. And it's, to me, the most comprehensive practice that there is, and it becomes a life. Well, sustainable architecture has always been important. It's always been important to use local materials and build with a local sense of tradition and craft, as well as respecting innovation and having new things be absorbed by our living style, our lifestyles. Sustainable architecture is about those things. I studied vernacular architecture as a Fulbright in Turkey, and really studied architecture that was designed not by architects. And in many ways, it's more honest, it's more straightforward, and it most certainly lasts longer. So those things were very impressive to me. And I believe that no matter what innovations we have today, for me, architecture is not temporal. If it is, it's an installation or a stage set or an interiors that is meant to be built, enjoyed for 3 months or 3 years, and then it goes away. For me, architecture is lasting, and it contributes to a lifestyle of the people who are in that community. So when we talk about architecture, sometimes we call it green architecture because that is a color that people can identify with that represents plants and living things. But actually, sustainability has a really deep and broad definition. It is not just about green technologies. It is about actually social and cultural change and how we as human beings can continue our existence. And many of the ways that we have become accustomed to live in the last 100 years even cannot be given to every other human being on Earth. And so we have to readjust our definition of progress and think about what actually is sustainable. And it will mean having different relationships with the natural environment than we have had. Absolutely. In other words, really, no one can think about a building until they think about the site and they think about the people and the community that the site is in. Context plays a huge part, and the systems that are very complex, archaeological systems, historical systems, geological systems, all those need to be considered. It can't be UFO architecture that just kind of comes in somebody's idea as an imaginative thing and lands. It has to coexist with the earth. And many architects throughout history have understood that and created great works that are open to views and have fresh air and save water and filter water. But the majority of buildings do not do that, and they need to begin to do that. Well, in some ways they are. LEED is a system, it's a point system that you get a rating for how green your building is. I believe it started in North America. It follows somewhat along the lines of the Hanover principles, which were some of the first standards for green design out of Hanover, Germany. And LEED is beginning to get more systemic in what it's addressing. It's addressing water filtration, stormwater management, and things like that. Most cities, there's a program called Architecture 2030, and it has many cities, mayors, and state governors signing this pact to reduce the carbon footprint of buildings by 2030. Now, Chicago did introduce some green incentives. One was to have green roofs as part of your design on an existing or a new building. But many cities are beginning to look at stormwater management, at food security, and many other issues that actually impact what we think of as a sustainable city or a green city. First of all, I learn a lot from my students because of their curiosity and trying new things and in testing new things. I think architecture has to be honest in that it has to have a relationship with its intention, and it also is a choreography of materials and time and space and people, and they must always respect that. It is not a simple thing, and it is not like a painting that you start and you learn and you end up with something. It is constantly almost a championship to achieve ideas and have them constructed and then have them understood by the people who are actually living in the building. I think it's probably the most honorable profession because it impacts how people live and how people even in the future will live. Teaching and practicing, it's kind of a blur because like the minute you get out of your studio, then you have work to do, and then when you're not doing that work, then you're back in the studio. There was a time when I only practiced, and I love to do buildings. We've done about 100 now, and I feel like we're just beginning. That really these were our kindergarten buildings as we're learning, and certainly our larger works on rivers and with conservation communities has been very, very meaningful to both of us. And that wouldn't have happened if we hadn't expanded our arena of practice. And the first architect that I worked for recently passed away, and he accomplished over 600 buildings in 30 different building types. And he left all these buildings in the earth. He's gone, but his buildings are there, and I think that I would like to make some more buildings.
Yeah.
So maybe that means taking some time out of the studio. Next.cc, because if you just Google Next, you'll get
Close door.
yeah, BP or Exxon or somebody, but Next.cc, C is for curiosity, and the other C is for compassion. And then it's also copy of, which means that it's basically collecting all these really great ideas that, in fact, designers are not like these autonomous individuals who have imaginative ideas and create them. They work like scientists, like artists, like environmentalists to create positive change. And after teaching at the university level for 25 years, we realized in having our own children that they really weren't introduced to design thinking at all until college. Canada and the UK teach it earlier, introduce it. And so here in our country, a third of our population goes to college. But what about those 2/3? Don't they get some choice about where they might live, or are they just consuming? So we realized that we wanted to bring all of the pleasures and excitement about architecture and design into K-12. So working with students, we came up with some journeys and made a little book. It's up there on the shelf. And we gave it to some inner city schools, and they called us like a week later and they go, okay, where are the rest of the journeys? Mm-hmm. So that's at the time then we created the website. And it's a continually growing thing. We're trying really hard by the end of the summer to get 200 journeys. The journeys each have like 3 to 5 activities. So it's like 1,000 activities, and then they're linked to 5,000 of the best museum, World Heritage tours, interactives, like pre-Photoshop, pre-Illustrator, Google Earth, Google SketchUp, so that you're getting an education in eco-literacy, how things are interconnected, and you're also getting introduction to digital fluency and easy ways to use the computer. People make videos like this. They write a poem about the marsh in their neighborhood, and they shoot a video of it. So we're trying to connect creativity with actually construction of ideas, because that actually is, the world is finite, but humans' imagination is infinite, and we want more young imaginations to be encouraged to succeed. So hard when it's a city, because there are so many great haunts where you'll turn a corner or go into a lobby. I do like, let's see, I like Lincoln Park because you can see the city and you know it's there, but it's like Chicago's own Central Park. It has a zoo, it has lakes, it has people running and having sports, it has cafes, and to me, that's the garden in the city. It's both of those things. And I guess I would have to say the City of Chicago green roof, because it was the first green roof. So I gave you 2 places, sorry. Okay. That it was on top of a building. It's on the 12th floor of City Hall. And when we made our videos to put on that City of Chicago green roof website, it's incredible. It's like a modern-day Acropolis, because you're up there and all these buildings are around there, and you're thinking, really, this is the way cities should be. And that really, the fact that a city as large as Chicago was behind this, and the mayor was planting trees and concerned about water quality, was fabulous. So actually working in Chicago and being around all these people who are interested in the same things has been really instrumental and inspiring. In Chicago, I didn't read that question before. Well, I love the Art Institute because of the treasures it holds, and for me it's been a living museum because I grew up as a little child in awe of it. And Renzo Piano added the modern wing, and it's right on the lake. And the lake, as Piano said when he stood on the bridge and took a picture back at the Gary's Pritzker Pavilion, he said, "Frank, Gary, I just gave you the best gift ever," because his building frames that view. So it's a building that not only has historically given us a lot of responses to Michigan Avenue, to Grant Park and the lake, but it's also held itself in culture and now is opening itself to new and contemporary ideas. Well, I think it will continue to get greener, right? I think there will be more food production on top of roofs and in vacant lots. I think it will continue to work on cleaning its water sources and contributing to the Great Lakes Water Consortium. I believe that it's just now has a lot of small innovative firms that are really kind of transforming how material goes together. Chicago, by and large, globally has been a conservative city. And it could be in response to the weather, or it could be in response to, it builds buildings that last for the most part. But I think that it's ready to bloom and really have some exciting new 21st century buildings. Oh, definitely nature. I would put that first. I am not nature deprived, and I would rather be outside most of my life than inside. So that has, I think, the understanding of localism versus globalism. Like you, and everyone loves to travel and experience new cultures and celebrate all these different ways people are living on the earth. But I also realize that the way the earth has been developed has been a detriment to localism, or what makes this place special than that place. So a lot of the in-between places in our country are the same, and I think that that's sad, and I think that they will actually go out of business. The centers will be what will hold, which are cities, villages, communities. So that, in just watching how the land was developed in my lifetime, really has changed how I think, and I really think it's important working with students that they don't ever take development in architecture irresponsibly, that they don't just to have a project. That they really have to say, I'm sorry, you really shouldn't build on this piece of land. It should be a water remediation park, or cultural park. Let's see. I think literature. I think reading about architecture and movies, seeing architecture that didn't exist, is really wonderful. And it makes you think, well, would I like to live in that or not? And I think living in major cities in the world has really, in different apartments and in different cultures, has really influenced me.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.